This is the CoSA member webinar. And today's webinar is, we're going to talk about reference during COVID at NARA and at the Alabama Department of History and Archives. So first, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Meg Phillips and Barbara Teague. Meg Phillips, the External Affairs Liaison with the National Archives and Records Administration. Meg, would you like to say a few words?
Really, just a few words. I'll be back in just a moment, but welcome to the NARA CoSA webinar. We're very happy to speak to you all.
And Barbara Teague, the Executive Director of the Council of State Archivists.
Thanks, Lisa, and thank you, Meg, for arranging this webinar for us with all of the wonderful reference staff or some of the wonderful reference staff from the National Archives. On behalf of the Council of State Archivists, we're really happy to have so many people attending today and to be able to learn from our counterparts at NARA and also from the Alabama Department of Archives and History about dealing with reference during COVID. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to do this, and we hope that these quarterly webinars that NARA and CoSA do together are helpful for everyone. I will turn this back over to the next person, who I think may be Lisa.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right. So our agenda today is, of course, we're welcoming everyone, and then we're going to have presentations from our NARA colleagues, a presentation from the Alabama Department of Archives and History. We'll have a chance for question and answer, and then, of course, announcements at the end. So let me introduce you to today's presenters. From NARA, our first presenter is Onauna Gay, and she joined NARA in 2008 as a temporary student employee in the Archives 2 processing unit. She worked on the Holocaust-era Assets Research Project and was selected as an archivist under the Archivist of Innovation, under the Archivist Development Program in 2010. In 2015, she became the Digitization Partnerships Coordinator with the Office of Innovation before stepping into supervision as the Section Chief for Civilian Records with the Textual Reference Unit at Archives 2 in College Park, Maryland. She holds a BA in History from Yale University and an MLS from the University of Maryland. Our second speaker will be Juliet Arai, and Juliet Arai received a Bachelor of Arts in History from George Washington University and an MLS from the University of Maryland. Upon graduating in 1999, she was hired as an archivist on the DC staff for a US Senator. She started working at the National Archives in Washington, DC in May of 2004 in the Initial Processing Unit. She later transferred to the Old Military and Civil Records Reference Branch at Archives 1 in June of 2005 and joined the Army team, which handles pre-World War I records of the US Army and War Department. In January of 2014, she became the supervisor of the Archives 1 Reference Section, later branch. Our third speaker will be Teresa Fitzgerald, and Teresa joined NARA in 2007 as a temporary student employee with the National Archives at St. Louis. Her position then transitioned to the Student Career Experience Program, and she became a permanent archives technician upon completion of her education. Teresa was selected as an archivist under the Archivist Development Program in 2010. She then became the reference supervisor for the National Archives in St. Louis in 2015 and was selected as the Chief of Archival Operations and Director of the National Archives at St. Louis in 2018. Our final NARA speaker will be Brian McGraw. Brian McGraw joined NARA in 2004. He served as Director of the National Archives at St. Louis and as Access Coordinator, St. Louis, the Midwest, and as the Director of the Personnel Records Division. Brian was responsible for the construction of the replacement NARA facilities at One Archives Drive in St. Louis and at 1411 Boulder Boulevard in Valmeyer, Illinois. He also oversaw the relocation of 800 staff and 4.2 million cubic feet of records to these new facilities from 2008 to 2012, moving an average of 7,000 cubic feet of records daily. Wow. Brian was also responsible for establishing the archival program in St. Louis, which has grown from 20,000 to nearly 900,000 cubic feet of archival personnel data series records. This collection grows at an average rate of about 25,000 cubic feet annually. And in his current position, Brian oversees one of the largest archival operations in NARA, which responds to over 125,000 offsite and 50,000 on-site requests annually. He also serves as a member of the leadership team in research services, responsible for oversight in all archival operations in NARA. Brian has over 28 years of governmental service, both as on a civilian and previously as a commissioned officer in the Air Force. He has a Bachelor of Science in Geography from Southeast Missouri State University, a Master's of Public Administration from the University of Oklahoma, and he completed his PhD work, ABD, in public policy from St. Louis University. And now our colleague from the Department of Alabama Archives and History, Courtney Pinkard, is the reference coordinator at the Alabama Department of Archives and History. She earned her master's in Library and Information Studies from the University of Alabama and held positions in public, academic, and law libraries prior to joining the archives team. She began working for the archives in November of 2017 and was promoted to coordinator in January of 2020. Courtney discovered a passion for genealogy while in middle school, and helping patrons connect to their family story is one of her favorite aspects of working in reference. So with that, I'm going to turn this over back to Meg to share a little bit more about NARA.
Thank you. Our speakers at NARA who are going to talk about reference are from research services today, and they're going to be focused on their experience under NARA's overall COVID operating procedures. So I'm going to say a few words about the overall procedures before they dive into reference. So our operating status is set for all locations in compliance with CDC and OMB guidance. So that level of decision has already been established for us. In following that guidance, NARA has been closing, opening, reclosing, reopening all of our buildings based on NARA's phased reopening plan. And I'll drop a link to the plan in the chat. It is publicly available. The plan ranges from closed through phase 1, limited opening, phase 2, partial opening, and phase 3, adjusted opening. NARA uses local case count and test positivity thresholds to determine when we can open. We require fewer than 200 new cases per 100,000 people and less than 10% test positivity rates in order to reopen. Right now, 30 of 40 NARA facilities are in some stage of reopening. 25 facilities are in phase 2, 5 are in phase 1, and 10 facilities remain totally closed. NARA's coronavirus information page at archives.gov/coronavirus, I'll also stick that in the chat, includes an expandable section in the middle with a plus sign that's called Agency Memoranda to Employees. And that's where we've hidden the information about the changes in status of all of our facilities, but all of that is posted online. So if you're curious about what our current status is, you can check. We thought knowing something about NARA's overall COVID operating status would be helpful background before diving into what's been going on in reference. But with that, let me turn it over to Onana.
Thanks, Meg. Hi, all. My name is Onauna Gay, and I am the Section Chief of Civilian Records in the Textual Reference Branch at Archives 2 in College Park, Maryland. As mentioned, today my colleagues and I will share how the National Archives has approached reference services during the COVID-19 pandemic while we're working from home with almost no access to our records. To offer some context, the speakers today are from reference units within research services, as Meg mentioned, which is within, obviously, the National Archives. And research services maintains the archival records of the federal government, excluding presidential records and excluding legislative records. So there are 18 reference units within research services, and we are located across the country, as seen on the slide. And the speakers today are from the reference units indicated in the red text on the slides. As mentioned, we will each give a brief overview on how our offices have adjusted to the current remote work environment and also touch on other reference units within research services as well. And I will cover reference services at the National Archives and College Park. Sorry, moved too quickly there. So my office, Textual Reference at Archives 2, provides reference services on approximately 1.8 million cubic feet of records, give or take a few thousand cubic feet, representing over 400 record groups and donated collections. And with such a large volume of records, we've grouped our holdings into 3 main and very large subject areas, and this is also how our office is organized according to these teams. So we have Army Air Force records, primarily from World War I forward, Navy Marine Corps records, primarily from World War II forward, and civilian agencies, primarily headquarters offices. But I do have to say that that is not a hard, fast rule. You will find records within those very large categories in other offices across research services. This is just to give you a very high level of what my office has. So pre-pandemic, we were quite a bustling office. In fiscal year 2019, we had over 28,000 research room visits. We pulled over 170,000 items, and we responded to over 15,800 offsite requests. So we had a lot going on. That all came to a screeching halt in March of 2020. The National Archives at College Park closed to researchers on March 13th and to staff on March 30th, though many staff were already working from home at that point. Some members of our office had worked remotely on an ad hoc basis before, but most were new to telework. So we had to transition to working with our systems remotely from home without being able to lean on many of the paper-based resources we usually consulted in the office. And frankly, without being able to see each other in person, which is a large part of how we like to collaborate on reference. And of course, we no longer had access to the records. So as a reference unit, we shifted our focus towards responding to offsite requests as substantially as possible, using digital and digitized finding aids, sharing web-based resources from external organizations, and whenever possible, directing researchers to digitized copies of our records found in the National Archives catalog. We actually have a significant volume of records digitized, though it is a drop in the bucket compared to what we have in the building. Still, many of these digitized series are frequently requested records, so being able to provide access to them from home enables us to continue to serve our researcher community. We also direct researchers to digitize content on our partner sites, such as Ancestry and Fold3. And NARA had actually partnered with the VA to digitize Navy deck logs from the Vietnam era. And that digitization project wrapped up just as we were going into quarantine. So our office worked with Research Services Digitization Division to provide to researchers digitized images of deck logs that were not yet available in the catalog. So that was pretty cool. In July, we started a gradual reopening that allowed 10% of division staff on site to perform mission critical work. That included responding to and completing FOIA requests, congressional requests, and requests from the VA. In October, we were able to increase that number of staff on site to 20%, and they continued to assist with these priority requests. We were able to respond to all FOIAs and congressionals in our backlog, but the outstanding VA requests remain significant. So we shifted civilian team members, who usually only work with civilian records, to help respond to VA requests in order to reduce the backlog. This required the civilian team to learn quickly from their military team colleagues how to identify relevant records and provide appropriate responses to the VA. In November, NARA approved research room access for a limited number of federal agencies needing access to records for emergency business needs, such as rights and interests, looming court dates, and congressional matters. Reference staff began providing limited remote consultation to support this research room pilot. And reference and research room staff developed a process by which records could be pulled and served safely, including virtual coordination of pull slips, frequently cleaning commonly used surfaces, applying social distancing protocols, and procedures for temporarily staging records prior to returning to the stacks. Then in December, Archives 2 closed again. We continued to focus on responding to offsite requests as substantially as possible, and the research room pilot actually continued with the VA because the VA needed sustained access to the records to process veterans' claims. Staffing levels were reduced to only the staff who were supporting the pilots, and virtual consultation to support the research room pilot also continued. And that is actually the current state of textual reference in research rooms, even at this time at Archives 2. Now I briefly want to touch on NARA's Special Media Records Division, which consists of the Cartographic and Architectural Records branch, the Motion Picture Audiovisual branch, and the Still Pictures branch. Since these units shifted to a 100% telework situation in March 2020, they've continued to accept and respond to public reference requests. An early challenge encountered was the use of NARA's inquiry system from home. So inquiry tracks the reference requests received by archival units, and it's a system critical to NARA's reference function, but it is also one of our few systems that is not web-based. So only a limited number of staff were able to access the system remotely at the beginning of the pandemic. For the first several months, feed spreadsheets were created to track similar fields and data points for each incoming request, such as how requests were assigned to staff, arrival and completion dates, and other details. Eventually, more users were able to come on board and be able to routinely use the system even remotely. So many of the typical inquiries that the special media division receives are routine and can be answered by staff at the same pace and with the same level of information that can be provided on site. For example, researchers with questions about citations to NARA's special media holdings, questions about rights or other use restrictions, questions about items digitized in the catalog, all of these types of questions can still receive a substantive answer by NARA staff working from home. However, researchers with inquiries requiring more detailed research or requiring staff to consult resources only available on site will receive, when possible, web-based resources or digitally available finding aids that may help them continue their research from home or prepare them for a future research visit at Archives 2 once we reopen. Such inquiries also will include standardized language that inform the researcher the status of NARA facilities and let them know that their request requires more detailed research than can currently be performed. They're invited to monitor our website for operational status to see when levels of service have increased. For our electronic records division, there actually has been minimal disruption in providing reference services for electronic records. This is due to three factors: that electronic records are accessible remotely, that a good volume of the paper documentation is already digitized, and that the most frequently requested records are already accessible online. As a result, staff in the electronic records division have been able to answer routine and complex requests, including reviewing and redacting records for Freedom of Information Act requests, and have fulfilled orders while teleworking. The biggest challenge has been access to the specialized software in order to review some of the records, and final responses for these inquiries are delayed until staff have access to the appropriate software. And now to offer just a bit of an agency-wide perspective, we've also been able to assist our customers through the History Hub, which is a crowdsourcing platform sponsored by the National Archives, where researchers can ask questions, share information, and get assistance from NARA staff, as well as staff from other participating institutions. The History Hub launched in late 2015 and has steadily grown in activity since then. During the current public health crisis, activity on the History Hub continued to increase as the world shifted towards connecting virtually with services that previously had also had an in-person component. The History Hub began with just a few researcher communities, which went through a few iterations as the platform grew. But during this time, during the COVID-19 pandemic, NARA's pivot towards providing more services remotely has resulted in the expansion of communities to better align with researcher questions and research services holdings. So that's it from A2. I will now turn it over to Juliet.
Hi, thank you, Onauna. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. So let me forward the slides. Okay, great. So again, I'm Juliet Arai, and I am the chief of the Archives 1 reference branch in Washington, D.C. So let me start with by giving you a quick overview of our operations at Archives 1 or A1. Our branch is one of 3 that make up the A1 Textual Records Division. The other 2 branches we have are Processing and Holding Security and the Research Rooms. Our division is the custodial unit for almost 600,000 cubic feet of records. We deal with 74 record groups, over 65,000 series, and about 1.4 million containers. Now, if I had to pick a word to describe our operations at A1, it would have to be genealogy. These are the records that people ask about, they want copies of, or they want to look at on site. We do have other types of researchers that come in, but the bulk are here to do genealogy. Okay. So in terms of working directly with the public, that falls on the reference and research room branches. So my branch does the reference on-site and off-site, and the research room staff take care of the on-site access as well as reproductions. So a quick word about reproductions. We have a really robust operation at A1. Genealogy records are the most requested. We actually have special order forms specifically for these records. All orders are handled by the forms reference staff and government contractors, or GOCO. The forms staff will be the ones to retrieve the records and prep them for reproduction. And then the GOCO staff will be the ones to actually make the copies and send them out. So how did Archives 1 handle COVID-19? Our facility closed in mid-March 2020 to both researchers and staff. And as a result, the entire staff had to pivot to 100% telework. At this time, we were really only able to provide limited off-site reference service. We couldn't check the records, we couldn't provide reproductions. In late July, early August, Archives 1 opened back up to staff, but on a really limited basis. When we got back, we had to deal with a really large backlog of mail, about 5 months worth. At the time, we were still only able to provide limited offsite reference, mainly because our on-site hours were so restricted, and we had to prioritize what we did when we were on site. We could check the files when we were there, and we could make reproductions of small files. Large-scale reproductions were still unavailable at this time. And the GOCO staff actually didn't return on site until late November 2020. So what did we have going for us during this time? Most of our inquiries come in by email, about 90 to 95%, and we respond by email. While most of our records are not digitized, a number of our records relating to genealogy are digitized and available through NARA partner sites and NARA's online catalog. The type of questions that we received also helped us. We received a lot of inquiries about genealogy, and luckily many of those requests were for records that were digitized. So my staff really just pointed people to the digital images online. We also had a large number of requests that could be easily answered with without staff having to go into the stacks to check the records or make reproductions. So it's questions that related to, say, non-federal records, questions where a researcher wanted an explanation about one of our records they found online. We got a lot of questions about big research topics. And in those cases, what we could do is we could email them one of many like staff generated handouts, how-to guides, or we could point them to one of our web pages on archives.gov. The other thing that we actually had going for us at the time is that we didn't really get many emergency requests from agencies. What we did get were mainly requests from the US Supreme Court. So now, where were we at a disadvantage when this whole thing started? Logistically, we were not ready for telework at all. Nobody in my office did telework. It was a brand new situation for us. We had nothing in place administratively. So it was the beginning of this whole thing was pretty tough on everybody. Another disadvantage we had was that we didn't really do much virtually. A number of our preliminary inventories and other finding aids weren't scanned or weren't available electronically. If I have to be really honest, even if they were available electronically, we just didn't utilize them. And then finally, and ironically, genealogy actually, in some ways, put us at a disadvantage. This was mainly because a lot of folks had time on their hands, and a lot of them thought this was the perfect opportunity to finally start that genealogy project that they had been waiting years to start. And so we got a lot of those folks coming to us during this time. And unfortunately, we really couldn't do much for them unless the records were digitized. And luckily for us, like I said before, they were digitized, so that kind of helped us too. But yeah, we had a lot of people that suddenly became interested in genealogy. Looking to the future of reference at Archives 1, obviously we're going to be doing more reference work virtually. We're already doing it right now. I think telework is definitely something that will be part of the discussion. We are and will be utilizing and creating more and more online and electronic resources. We actually have a large office-wide finding aids project going on right now. It's a survey of all of the series that we have, so over 65,000 series, and we're trying to find out which ones have finding aids, which ones don't. We're looking at cases where some series might be really good for digitization. And it was also during this initiative that we, with help from our A1 processing branch, we were able to identify and scan all of the non-digitized preliminary inventories and finding aids. And so they are all scanned and being used by staff right now. And we've actually been able to upload some of those finding aids onto the catalog. So that's pretty much what happened with Archives 1. And I will now turn it over to Teresa.
Hello. Okay, I am the director of the National Archives at St. Louis. We are co-located with the National Personnel Record Center. We are well known for being the repository for the official military personnel files for the 20th century. However, we do have a number of personal data series outside of the OMPF, and that's specifically what my office controls and performs reference on. And that will be the main section that I'm kind of covering a little bit. We were
able to, just as A1 and A2, maintain some sort of a remote response to offsite reference cases after we closed in March of 2020. This includes providing digital images that we might have already made. Prior to COVID, our offices went completely digital. So we provide digital copies via a remote one hub system. And then we also invoice for payments via a pay.gov system, which is all online. We also have been directing people to the NARA catalog and Ancestry, Family Search, Fold3, anything that might be a good resource for any alternate information. Because of our records and the fact that they are personal data series, a lot of them are used for benefits, whether it's military or selective service or jobs or citizenship. So our staff has been able to go on site in a remote capacity in order to respond to those types of requests. We also go on site to support the National Personnel Record Center for any of our data series that may assist them in responding to a request for a veteran's benefit. All staff are teleworking, and about 48% of the staff at the National Archives at St. Louis are currently working on site each week to perform those tasks. Unfortunately, the National Personnel Record Center's backlog hit 500,000 requests in spring of 2021. They are systematically working through this backlog on a priority basis, so burials, medical emergencies, etc. Normally, if they were fully staffed, they would respond to 25,000 cases a week, but right now they are responding to 10,000 cases. We are all operating under reduced levels following the guidance from the CDC and the OMB and the public health orders that are local. Due to the backlog, all reference services from the research services in St. Louis was redirected to perform only tasks that would support the record center with their backlog. So we are still answering those emergency cases that have responsive records in our holdings as they come up, but all other reference services has been suspended from the National Archives at St. Louis in order to help the record center. We've been searching and pulling records to help them. We've set up scanning hubs, and we are also scanning cases to provide to remote work staff. NARA recently issued all of us, or most of us, laptops. So we are able to go into our different systems just as we would on site, and that has been a lot of help. So the remote work staff are able to assist with the backlog as well. All routine requests for the records at I can talk, I promise. All routine requests for records in the holdings at the National Archives at St. Louis. So that it mainly includes the paper requests, but email as well if we can't respond remotely, are being put into a queue, and we are working them in the order they were received once we can go back to our normal operation. And I will turn it over to Brian.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your time and attention today. I am going to be talking about offsite reference in St. Louis, picking up on the St. Louis piece from Teresa, and then also sharing some information as to what's going on with our field units outside of the three that we've discussed thus far in the National Archives. So, as Teresa mentioned, all the on-site reference in St. Louis is directed to helping NPRC with their backlog, and we have been suspended and closed in our research room since March of last year. We're actually configuring the research room into a massive scanning hub that will allow us to support NPRC with additional resources and capabilities to digitize textual records among the requests that they have. And that will help them be able to distribute that work to their remote staff to allow them to close cases and take care of veterans. We are concurrently planning to reopen the research room, and I don't know when that will be yet because we have to work through this higher priority work. So, but we are working those plans, and we're looking forward to the time where we can open the research room down the road in whatever configuration and with whatever restrictions that may exist at that time. Switching now to the field units. So all of those locations around the country, from Boston to Seattle, the staff have been working behind the scenes, just as my colleagues have discussed previously. And so if somebody submits a request to the National Archives facility in Kansas City or any of the others, they'll get an initial response from a staff member. It's not an auto-generated reply, and it'll explain the situation, acknowledge that they've received it, and then let them know that they will work that as soon as they're able when they're reopened. As well, they're trying to provide as much information from other sources to help answer a question if it's feasible. So if there's something that's already digitized in the NARA catalog, maybe at part of the access to archival database, or on a partner site such as Ancestry or Family Search, they'll direct them to that in the attempt to try to answer that question. Additionally, the staff throughout these field locations and throughout NARA has been working on a variety of projects over the past year as we've been closed and teleworking. We've been updating finding aids and in some cases digitizing those that were previously textual materials. They're doing this to help researchers and customers be able to make an informed decision about what they're looking for and hopefully answer questions ahead of time so that when we're able to respond and they're able to engage with us, we have something that can be completed efficiently and effectively. Of course, with all locations, as applicable based upon their holdings, they will respond to emergency requests for rights, entitlements, and benefits. So someone, say a homeless veteran who is an American Indian nationality, may need to look at something from the BIA records, or there may be someone needing something from an immigration record for citizenship. Those types of requests are worked as they come in. So as I finish up here, I just want to say, because I know there's many colleagues on the line here today, that it's been an honor working with you folks over the past year, and we have done a tremendous amount to improve access in this situation that we're in under COVID. And not only the staff in St. Louis, but throughout our agency have worked tirelessly to improve our finding aids, to make things more available, and to answer questions and help researchers. I also want to thank the research community for all of their patience and understanding in these difficult times. And I know that we're all looking forward to getting back to normal very soon, and hopefully that won't be too much longer. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Courtney.
Thank you, Brian. I hope everybody can hear me. And my name is Courtney Pinkard, and I am the reference coordinator at the Alabama Department of Archives and History. I'm going to speak a little bit today from the state archives perspective, but this has really been a fascinating look into how NARA has been approaching this crisis over the last more than year now. And to the other state archives, you know, we at the Alabama Archives have sort of journeyed through this forest with you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our experience in Alabama today. And I titled this very brief presentation Paradigm Shifts because that's really what we have experienced. And I feel like the changes that we had to make in direct response to COVID have led to some long-term changes in the way that we deliver reference services as an agency. So I'm sure that this timeline, the response timeline, probably looks different for all 50 states, but this is how things played out in Alabama. You may or may not know that Alabama was one of the last states to actually confirm a case of COVID, And of course, we knew it was here because the surrounding states around us had cases already, but we just sort of lagged behind, I think, in the reporting process at first. And so the very first COVID case in Alabama was reported on March 13th. And on March 17th, all of our state agency departments shut down, including the archives. And it was kind of crazy because it was a scenario where it's like we left work on a Friday and we had discussed the idea of work from home, and then everything changed over the weekend, and that following Monday we were teleworking. It was just like that. It turned on a dime. But our ADAH employees worked from home starting on March 17th until the first week of May when we were allowed to return to our building. And then about a month after that, we started a research by appointment process, and we were only allowing patrons to pull original records during their appointments. This week, we have relaxed some of our restrictions. We have added a couple more slots into our research room for genealogists to come in and use our microfilm and computer resources. And we're actually going to have our very first genealogists visiting us tomorrow, and they will be the first genealogists that have come in to do research since March of last year. So we're really excited to see them because a large bulk of our clientele, a lot of our foot traffic is actually from genealogists. So I'm sure that a lot of us had to face very similar challenges when we started working from home. And our immediate question was, how are we going to be able to conduct research on behalf of our patrons while we are physically separated from our collections and the resources that we would normally use? Now, we did have a slight leg up on this in that we were only accepting research requests by an online form before the pandemic even started. And so we do occasionally still get a paper form sent in by snail mail, but we had just sort of established an expectation with our clients that we accept requests by the web form, we don't do them by phone, and we just really, even before we necessarily realized how helpful this was going to be in a work from home scenario, we encouraged them to use the web form. And as I mentioned, a majority of our traffic is from genealogists, and a majority of our research requests are also genealogy related. And again, that's kind of by design because we don't use our research request forms to take on large projects of research that deal with manuscripts. So again, we had already sort of established a culture of research requests are for genealogical research, and they are not time intensive or material intensive. So that helped us a little bit too. But then we still had to answer the question, how do we do these genealogy research requests when we're not physically in the building and able to access our resources? Thankfully, Ancestry came through for us big time because we have digitized a lot of our crucial like county government records. We have digitized those to ancestry.com. They were able to give us remote access to our library edition, which is usually only available on site. And so they were able to get access for my staff and I to do that kind of research at home. And it was a lifesaver for sure. And then usually the way we would approach providing the results of the research to the patron is to make copies of the documents that we find that kind of answer their question and mail them. Well, we were all at our various homes and had no access to the state mail room, and it wasn't operating at that time anyway. So we sort of transitioned into digital delivery of documents. We emailed them directly to the client when we could, but if we had a large number of documents that made, email attachments not really feasible, we would also provide either a Google Drive link to the patron, or we would use Dropbox, something like that, some digital way to deliver the large amount of documents to them. What that meant, of course, is that we could not pull manuscript materials because they're in our basement and we were not here. And we also couldn't answer snail mail requests, so we had to just kind of return those to sender and not fill them. And then we also, could not provide results by snail mail either. And then once we returned to the building, my staff and I were able to get in. We're really fortunate in that we are stationed in one of the more modern parts of our facility. It's more open, we're a little more spread out. And so while some divisions within our agency continue to work from home, or they started to rotate in and out, we were able to all come back at one time and start working again in our research room. But then we had to start considering how we were going to allow the public to start coming back in. And some of our initial questions when we were thinking about the appointment process, and I'm sure, as agencies and staff members, you asked yourself these questions. How many people in the research room, how many members of the public is too many? How long should we let their appointment slots last? How are we going to handle pulls, additional, retrieval that we can't do ahead of time? And how are we going to deal with handling cash money? We have lockers that are coin operated for patrons to store their belongings, and we also charged, of course, money for copies. And then we also were considering, what about quarantining the materials? And how long do we need to do that? Which materials need that extra step? And then finally, we did end up making the decision that we needed to restrict access to computers and microfilm readers. And that was partially, because they would require extra sanitization if they were being handled regularly by the public, but also because the area of our research room where we have that equipment set up it's a little bit of a tighter space. It's not as open as the rest of the room, and we felt like it was not a good environment because our staff also needed to use like the microfilm machines. So we just decided to cut that out and only offer access to original records. So this is what our finished appointment procedure wound up looking like. We created a Microsoft form and we linked that on our website, and that's how patrons could submit appointment requests. I received the form submissions, and I would contact the patron and set up the date and time that they wanted to come in, and then I would add their appointment to a shared Outlook calendar that the rest of my staff could also see. We offered 2 time slots, a morning and afternoon, and they were 3 hours each, so 8:30 to 11:30 and 12:30 to 3:30. We allowed, at first we were going to say a max of 4 patrons because that's how many tables we have in our manuscript reading area. But we quickly figured out that we needed some space for staff to be able to work as well. So we reduced that to 3 maximum per shift or per time slot. We had 1 staff archivist that was on the floor per day, so they were the ones that were monitoring the activity in the reading area. And then once again, we only were pulling original manuscripts, no microfilm materials. We weren't allowing people to use computers or books. And if the material had already been digitized, we didn't pull it, and we would just encourage the patron to use the digital version. And I wanted to include a little bit of data about how the appointments have worked. So we've had, since we started the process in June of 2020, we've had 191 total requests submitted through our Microsoft form, and 74% of those have been requests to use manuscript materials. 26%, or almost a quarter of them, have been genealogists requesting to come in and use like microfilm and computer-based resources for genealogy research. And I just wanted to point out that this 191 number does not include people who were trying to submit a research request, but they accidentally clicked the wrong link on the website. people who wound up booking multiple appointments with a single form submission. So they might put in one form, but they booked an entire week of appointments. And it also does not cover follow-up appointments that were scheduled by phone or verbally while the patron was in the room. I tried to encourage as much as I could, the use of the form so I could print it out and have a paper record of it. But occasionally, we just had a patron that wanted to call or send an email or just ask us, before they left, hey, can I come in tomorrow? So based on our Outlook calendar, we have had 244 individual appointments completed to date, and we have another 39 appointments projected for summer of 2021, and that number has probably already gone up by a few because I've had a few new requests come in this week. And finally, I just wanted to touch on another aspect that presented a challenge for us when we were responding to COVID. Our reference staff also participate in outreach activities. Typically, this takes the form of genealogy workshops that are led by reference staff. And before COVID, we would offer half-day in-person genealogy workshops that took place in the archives building. And then we would invite our patrons to come in, the rest of the afternoon and work with us and with our resources. We had planned to do these half-day workshops in person in the spring of 2020, but then of course everything happened, and we had to pivot and figure out some other way to present this information. So we took our genealogy workshops online, and my staff, while they were at home, we recorded our presentations and then we posted them to our YouTube channel and to Facebook as recorded presentations. Then in the fall, we started kind of experimenting with, instead of pre-recording the presentations, doing them live, streaming them. And in the spring of 2021, we launched a new virtual tutorial series that we called the Research Rundown. And these are shorter tutorials that focus on a single topic within genealogy. Initially, when we recorded our presentations, they were big topics like, African American genealogy research or women in genealogy research. And so we narrowed the focus to something that could be discussed in 30 to 45 minutes to make it convenient for people to watch online. And then we started streaming those live on both our Facebook page and our YouTube channel using the StreamYard product. And we have had just overwhelmingly positive response to our virtual genealogy programming. We ask that patrons that participate also submit surveys at the end. And so I've been able to get a little bit of feedback from the attendees or the people that are tuning in, and they have really just been very appreciative. We have, people from all over the country that are tuning in to watch, and it's really been great, and it definitely will be something that we continue this fall and going forward because the response has just been so positive. And I think that's all of my slides. Yes, so I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa. Here you go, Lisa. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Courtney, and thank you all of the NARA presenters. What great information we've had today. So now's your chance, everyone, to ask questions of our presenters. So let us know, is there something you'd like to hear more about how they handled something during this period of time? What's on your mind? So you can either raise your hand, and your raise your hand is kind of over if you've got your participants bar up. It's kind of on the bottom, and if you raise your hand, we'll get to see that, and then we can call on you, or just type it in chat. So now's your chance. But while we're waiting for you guys to get your questions typed in, I'm going to ask a couple. So with reference and staff working from home, how long, if I'm a patron, how long can I expect to receive a response to my requests? So that's kind of thrown out to all of you. So whoever would like to take that one and run, start with it, and everyone else can chime in. So
Well,
how long? Go ahead,
I'll,
Brian.
I'll start off here. Again, the focus on my response is relative to military personnel records, and then I'll talk briefly on some of the traditional archival materials used in genealogy. For the military personnel records, requests that come in that are of a high priority for benefits and entitlements, burials, medical emergencies, things of that nature. Those are given prompt attention, and those are typically answered within just a few days. And there's a team dedicated in the National Personnel Records Center to respond to those. For other types of requests that involve genealogy or any other types of records that are not of a benefit and entitlement nature, those are being worked on a first in, first out once we have the ability to do that on a broader scale. So most of those are in a queue to be worked. I'll turn it over now to my colleagues.
So for the textual reference unit, our standard response time pre-pandemic is 10 business days, and we've been keeping with that even during the pandemic. When we receive a request, like I said, we've tried to provide as substantive responses as we can with the various digital resources that we have available to us. And we get those responses out to researchers within the 10 business days. And I believe for the other archival reference units at A2, that's the same for them as well.
Okay, great. We've got a question from Brianne Wright. So what is considered an emergency request? You guys mentioned, or someone mentioned the Supreme Court. So what would constitute an emergency request in your various units?
Hey, it's Juliet. For the court cases, it would usually be something where a trial was coming up. In the past, we've gotten where there'd be like a stay of execution, those kind of requests, anything to do with rights and things like that. So we would turn those around pretty quickly. So yeah, so for Supreme Court, yeah, you generally it was that, but from other agencies, so like BLM, Bureau of Land Management, there was one court case they were involved in, so we tried to turn those records around too. So yeah, it's always a case by case basis, but usually with the court records, we try to do those pretty fast.
Great, thank you. This is a question for Courtney. How did the Alabama Department of Archives and History address the transition from office to employees working at home? How did you guys handle that?
So as a supervisor, I think this was probably a learning experience for me. I'm a gamer, and so I would never be without high-speed internet and a working computer. It's just I got it. It's a lifeline. I gotta have it. But that was not the case for many of my coworkers, and we were, I guess I had never really stopped to think about the different levels of access and capabilities with technology that everybody has going on at home. And so one of the immediate challenges that we had over that weekend, between maybe we'll work from home and guess what, you're working from home, is we had to get everybody the equipment that they needed to be able to telework. And one of my coworkers didn't even have internet. I had no idea. A couple other coworkers, they had laptops at home, but they were older and they were not really able to handle some of the more robust programs we were trying to use, like Microsoft Teams. So, we had to try to get everybody online, get everybody functioning, and our IT staff at the archives did a phenomenal job supporting us, because I know that probably most state agencies in Alabama were scrounging for laptops and, Wi-Fi hotspots and things like that. And they were somehow able to scrape together what we needed to get the job done. And since then, then we have, before the pandemic, all staff were working on desktop computers in our cubicles or in our offices. And now most of us have transitioned to laptops. And, that still kind of hinges on the idea that you will take your laptop home with you or have the ability to retrieve it and and use it. And occasionally, we have had instances where we had the employee at home and the laptop not at home, the laptop's at work. But, for the most part, that has given us a little bit more flexibility to be able to work from home and make the teleworking happen. And so that's kind of how one kind of long-term adjustment that we've made to be able to support telework.
Great, thank you for that. I don't see any other questions at this point, and to be mindful of our time for everyone, I'd like to thank everyone for being with us today, and just remind you we have other upcoming webinars through CoSA, so we hope you'll take advantage of those. So here's the links to the couple that are coming up here in May, so check those out. Naturally, we hope you stay in touch with all of us. To contact anyone in CoSA, here's the different ways we communicate, so we hope you'll take advantage of that. Oh, and if you didn't notice in chat, it was posted the link to Alabama's research rundown. So if you'd like to go check that out, please do. And then, of course, to get in touch with our NARA folks, this is how you can contact them. So we appreciate everyone's attention today and attendance. And we hope as you leave, you will take a moment and answer the survey questions, because that really does help us as we do future programs. So thank you everyone for participating in today's CoSA-NARA webinar. Thank you panelists, and thank you attendees. Have a great day, and everyone take care.